The apartment
That's
was
beautiful,
quiet
sweetie.
in the
Keep
way that
going.
only
I'm
empty
making it
places
pretty
can
for
be.
you.
I love it. You're
Not
doing a
the
great job.
comfortable silence
Yay!
of someone sleeping in the next room, but the hollow quiet of absence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own breathing. Sophie Calloway sat at the kitchen table with her legs swinging 6 inches above the linoleum floor. 7 years old, brown hair that her mother had braided that morning already coming loose at the
This
edges.
is good.
Green eyes that
I'm
seemed too
glad.
old for her face
Eat up.
fixed on the digital clock above the stove. The numbers glowed green in the dimness of the October evening.
I got you
6:47.
something.
Her mother had left
What
at
is
6
it?
o'clock,
Open it and see.
47
Wow, I
minutes
love
ago.
it.
The apartment was small, one bedroom on the second floor of a building that had seen better decades. The walls were thin enough that Sophie could hear Mrs. Patterson's television through the ceiling, a game show with canned laughter and bells. The radiator in the corner hissed and clanked, doing its best against the Tennessee autumn cold that seeped through the single-pane windows. Sophie's small hands rested flat on the table, palms down, fingers spread. She had learned to sit still when she was worried. Movement made the worry bigger, gave it more space to grow. So she sat very still and watched the clock and waited for the sound of her mother's key in the lock. Claire Calloway had stood in the same kitchen 47 minutes ago, pulling on her jacket, the one with the broken zipper that she kept meaning to fix. She had kissed the top of Sophie's head, right where the braid started. "Be back by bedtime, sweetheart. Lock the door behind me." Sophie had looked up from her coloring book, a picture of a lighthouse she had been working on for 3 days, trying to get the stripes exactly right. "Promise?" Her mother had smiled the smile that made the corners of her eyes crinkle, the one that meant everything was going to be okay. "Promise. We never break promises, remember?" "Never," Sophie had echoed. "What's the rule if someone knocks?" "Don't open it unless it's you or Mrs. Patterson. And if the phone rings, let the machine get it unless I hear your voice." "Good girl." Claire had picked up her purse, checked for her keys, glanced at the small notepad stuck to the refrigerator with a pineapple-shaped magnet. The list said milk, bread, eggs, peanut butter, apples. Basic things, grocery store things. "I'll be back before you know it. There's crackers in the cabinet if you get hungry." The door had closed. Sophie had climbed down from her chair and turned the deadbolt, then the chain just like her mother had taught her. She had heard Claire's footsteps descending the stairs, the downstairs door opening and closing, and then nothing. That was 48 minutes ago now. The clock changed while Sophie watched. Bedtime was 9 o'clock. It was Friday night, which meant no school tomorrow, but the routine stayed the same. Bath at 8:30, pajamas, teeth brushed, one-story lights out at 9. Claire was never late for bedtime. Not once in Sophie's entire memory had her mother missed tucking her in. Sophie climbed down from the chair and walked to the living room window. The street light outside cast orange shadows across the parking lot below. She could see the empty space where her mother's car should have been, the beat-up Toyota Corolla with the dent in the back fender from when someone had backed into it at the diner. The space was still empty. The grocery store was 12 blocks away. Sophie knew because she had counted once when they walked it together last summer when the car was broken. 12 blocks there, 12 blocks back, plus however long it took to shop. An hour maybe. An hour and a half if the lines were long. 7:03 now. Sophie returned to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the sink, the one she needed the step stool to reach. Crackers like her mother had said, a sleeve of saltines half gone, a jar of peanut butter, the cheap kind that separated if you didn't stir it. She took 3 crackers and ate them slowly, sitting back at the table watching the clock. 7:15, 7:30, 7:45. At 8 o'clock, Sophie got up and ran the bath herself. She knew how to do it. Hot tap, 3/4, cold tap. 1/4 test with your elbow, not your hand, her mother had taught her. She climbed into the tub and washed her hair with the strawberry shampoo, rinsed it carefully so the soap wouldn't get in her eyes, climbed out and dried off with the yellow towel that hung on the back of the door. She put on her pajamas, the ones with the clouds on them, brushed her teeth for 2 minutes, counting in her head the way the dentist had shown her. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 8:45, she chose a book from the small shelf beside her bed. The one about the mouse who was afraid of everything but learned to be brave. She had read it so many times she had most of it memorized. She climbed into bed and read it to herself, whispering the words, doing the voices the way her mother did. At 9 o'clock, she turned off the light and lay in the darkness listening. The radiator hissed. Mrs. Patterson's television murmured through the ceiling. A car door slammed somewhere in the parking lot, and Sophie's heart jumped. But the footsteps that followed went in the wrong direction, fading away instead of coming closer. She waited. At some point, without meaning to, she fell asleep. She woke to daylight, the kind of pale Saturday morning light that comes through thin curtains and makes dust motes visible in the air. For a moment, still caught in the space between sleep and waking, Sophie thought everything was normal. Then she remembered. She sat up fast, her heart already hammering, and listened. Silence. She climbed out of bed and padded barefoot down the short hallway to her mother's room. The door was open the way it always was. The bed was still made from yesterday morning, the blue blanket pulled tight, the pillows arranged. No dent in the covers. No one had slept there. Sophie stood in the doorway for a long time, her hand on the frame, looking at that untouched bed. Then she walked to the kitchen. The clock said 8:37. On the table, exactly where she had left them last night, were 3 crumbs from her crackers. The refrigerator hummed. The radiator clanked. Her mother's purse was gone. Her jacket was gone. But on the counter beside the coffee maker was the pineapple magnet that had been holding the grocery list to the refrigerator. The list itself was gone. Claire had taken it with her. Sophie opened the refrigerator. The light inside was bright and cold. Half a gallon of milk, probably sour by now, they had bought it Monday. A jar of pickles, a container of leftover rice from the Chinese place. On the bottom shelf, the crisper drawer held an apple slightly soft and the last 3 carrots from a bag. In the cabinet, the crackers, the peanut butter, a can of tomato soup, a box of macaroni and cheese. Sophie closed the cabinet and sat back down at the table. She put her hands flat on the surface, palms down, and she thought. Her mother had gone to the grocery store. She had taken the list. She had said she would be back by bedtime. She had promised. Claire Calloway did not break promises. This was the thing Sophie knew the way she knew her own name, the way she knew which direction was up. Her mother kept her word. When she said she would be somewhere, she was there. When she said she would do something, she did it. They had a whole life built on that foundation, just the 2 of them, and it had never once cracked. So something had happened. Something that prevented her mother from coming home. Sophie sat very still and worked through the possibilities the way she worked through math problems at school. Step by step, logical. Possibility 1. Her mother had been in an accident, car accident maybe, but then the hospital would call. Unless her mother didn't have ID, but she always had ID. She kept her driver's license in her wallet in her purse over her shoulder. Possibility 2. Her mother had gotten sick, collapsed somewhere. But again, someone would call. Someone would find ID. Someone would contact her. Possibility 3. Her mother had decided to leave, to just go, to break the promise and never come back. Sophie dismissed this one immediately. Impossible. Not the way the world worked, not the way her mother worked, which left possibility 4. Her mother was trying to get back, but couldn't, was stuck somewhere, was calling, but the calls weren't reaching, was fighting her way back right now this very minute, and would walk through that door any second. Sophie looked at the door. She waited. The morning passed in strange increments. Time moved differently when you were waiting. Minutes stretched like taffy, then snapped forward in chunks. Sophie ate 2 more crackers with peanut butter for breakfast. She drank water from the tap. She sat on the couch in the living room and watched the parking lot through the window. Cars came and went. None of them was the Toyota with the dented fender. At noon, Sophie made herself macaroni and cheese. She boiled water in the pot her mother used, measured the noodles, carefully stirred them so they wouldn't stick. When they were done, she drained them in the colander, added the cheese powder, and a little milk stirred until it was orange and creamy. She ate it at the table, slowly making it last. The apartment felt bigger when she was alone in it. The sounds were all wrong. Her own footsteps too loud on the floor. The refrigerator too loud when it cycled on. The silence too loud between the sounds. She washed her bowl and spoon and put them in the dish rack to dry. At 3 o'clock, she went back to her room and looked at her bookshelf. At the bottom, in a cardboard box that had once held her mother's work shoes, Sophie kept her important things. She knelt down and pulled it out. Inside, $7 in bills folded and rubber banded together. Allowance money saved over months. A photograph of her mother taken last summer at the park, squinting into the sun, smiling. A smooth black stone she had found by the river. A birthday card her mother had made her construction paper with hand-drawn flowers. And a drawing. Sophie had made the drawing herself for her mother's birthday last month, September 23rd. They had celebrated with cupcakes from the bakery, the kind with too much frosting, and Sophie had presented her creation with both hands, solemn and proud. The drawing showed two figures hand in hand, standing beneath a bright yellow sun. The taller figure had brown, wavy hair and a smile. The smaller figure wore a pink backpack and had the same smile. At the bottom, in Sophie's careful first-grade printing, "Me and Mom." Claire had put it on the refrigerator with the pineapple magnet immediately. She had said it was the best present she had ever received. She had said she would keep it forever. Sophie held the drawing now and looked at it. The crayon colors were still bright. The figures were simple, stick people with round heads and straight-line bodies, but she had worked hard on the details. 5 fingers on each hand, actual shoes with laces, a sun with triangular rays. She put the drawing carefully back in the box. Then she took out the $7 and counted it. 3 $1 bills, 4 more $1 bills. She could count higher than 7, obviously, but 7 was what she had. She put the money in her pocket. Then she took out her pink backpack from where it hung on the back of her door. It was her school backpack, small and shaped like an actual backpack, with 2 straps and a front pocket. She had gotten it last year and it still smelled faintly of new plastic. Sophie opened it and began to pack. 1 change of clothes, underwear, socks, her second favorite shirt, the one with the purple stripes, a pair of jeans. She folded them as neatly as she could and put them in the main compartment. The $7 went into the front pocket. The drawing went in next, folded along its original creases, careful not to smudge the crayon. The photograph of her mother slipped into a Ziploc bag so it wouldn't get bent. Her notepad and the box of 8 crayons, the basic colors, the ones that hadn't broken yet. She zipped the backpack closed and set it beside her bed. Then she went back to the living room and sat on the couch and waited some more. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows in the parking lot rotated and lengthened. At 6 o'clock, Sophie opened the can of tomato soup and ate it cold straight from the can with a spoon. It tasted like metal and salt and something almost sweet. She finished half and put the rest in the refrigerator. At 7 o'clock, the sun set. The street light outside clicked on. At 8 o'clock, Sophie took her bath again, put on her pajamas, again brushed her teeth again. She climbed into bed and lay there in the dark, listening to the radiator and Mrs. Patterson's television and the sound of her own breathing. She fell asleep without meaning to again. Sunday morning came the same way Saturday had. Pale light, thin curtains, dust in the air. Sophie checked her mother's room first thing. The bed was still made, still empty. In the kitchen, the clock said 7:15. Outside, the parking lot was quiet. Sunday morning quiet, the kind where people slept late and the world felt paused. Sophie opened the refrigerator and took inventory. The milk was definitely sour now. The apple was getting soft. She ate the apple for breakfast, standing at the sink, eating around the brown spots. She ate 3 more crackers with the last of the peanut butter, scraping the jar with the spoon. When she was done, she washed the jar and put it in the recycling bin under the sink. Her mother had taught her about recycling. Glass, plastic, paper, different bins for different things. The apartment was colder today. The radiator was working but not hard enough. Sophie put on her jeans and her purple striped shirt and her sneakers, the white ones with the cartoon characters on the sides. She tied the laces the way her mother had shown her. Rabbit ears looped one over the other, pulled tight. Double knot so they wouldn't come undone. She sat on the couch and looked at the door. All day Sunday she waited. She watched the parking lot. She listened for footsteps in the hallway. She counted the cars that came and went. None of them was her mother's. At some point she turned on the television, but the images just moved across the screen without making sense. Cartoons, then a cooking show, then something with people laughing. She turned it off. The light changed. Morning became afternoon, became evening. The shadows rotated again. At 6 o'clock, Sophie went to her room and got her backpack. She brought it to the kitchen table and set it down. Then she found a piece of paper and one of her crayons, the blue one, and she wrote a note. Her handwriting was careful, first grade neat. Each letter formed the way her teacher had shown her. Dear Mom, gone to find you. Wait here. Love, Sophie. She put the note at the center of the table, right where her mother would see it when she came back. Because she would come back. She had to come back. And when she did, she needed to know where Sophie had gone. Sophie looked around the apartment. Her home. The only place she had ever lived that she could remember. The couch with the worn armrest where her mother always sat. The kitchen table with the wobbly leg. The window with the view of the parking lot. The door with the deadbolt and the chain. She picked up her backpack and put her arms through the straps, adjusting them so they sat right on her shoulders. The weight was comfortable, not too heavy, just right. She walked to the door and stood there for a long moment, her hand on the deadbolt. She had never left the apartment alone before. Never. Her mother's rules were clear. Stay inside when I'm not here. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't go out alone. But her mother wasn't here, and someone had to find her. Sophie slid the deadbolt open. The sound was loud in the quiet apartment, a solid metal chunk. Then the chain sliding through its track, falling free. She put her hand on the doorknob. She turned it. The door opened. The hallway beyond was dim lit by a single yellow bulb at the far end. The carpet was brown and worn a path of lighter brown down the center where feet had walked for years. The air smelled like other people's cooking and old cigarettes and something musty that lived in the walls. Sophie stepped out into the hallway. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click. She stood there, breathing, her heart beating fast. Then she reached up and felt along the top of the door frame until her fingers found it. The spare key. Her mother kept it there for emergencies, hidden in plain sight. Sophie took it and slipped it under the doormat the way her mother had shown her once. A better hiding place. Safer. She turned and walked down the hallway to the stairs. Her plan was simple because she was 7, and simple was all she had. Her mother had gone to the grocery store. That meant she had to go to the grocery store, too. Start where Mom started. Look for clues. Look for anyone who had seen her. But first, the diner. Riverside Diner on Magnolia Avenue was where her mother worked. Tuesday through Saturday, usually sometimes Sundays if they were short-staffed. Claire Calloway had worked there for 3 years, serving coffee and eggs and pie to people who left tips and coins and occasional crumpled bills. Sophie had been there dozens of times, sitting in the back booth with her coloring books while her mother finished a shift. If anyone knew where her mother was, it would be Angie. Angie worked the same shifts, the same section. Angie had red hair and too many rings and a laugh that was loud enough to hear from the kitchen. Sophie knew how to get to the diner. She had walked it with her mother before, back when the car was broken and the weather was nice. 12 blocks. Turn right out of the apartment building, walk 4 blocks to Magnolia, turn left, walk 8 more blocks to the corner with the blue mailbox. The diner was right there, impossible to miss, with its big windows and neon sign that said Riverside in cursive letters that glowed pink at night. She started walking. It was early Monday morning, just past 5:30 when she left the apartment. The sun was not quite up yet, the sky that pale gray blue that comes before dawn. The air was cold enough that she could see her breath small clouds that disappeared as fast as they formed. The streets were mostly empty. A few cars passed headlights still on people on their way to early shifts. A man walking a dog crossed the street ahead of her, not looking her way. A woman in a running outfit jogged past, earbuds and eyes forward. Nobody looked at Sophie. Nobody slowed down. Nobody asked why a 7-year-old girl with a pink backpack was walking alone before sunrise on a Monday morning. She kept her head down and walked. The 12 blocks took longer than she remembered. Her legs were shorter than her mother's, the backpack light as it was pulled at her shoulders. By the time she turned onto Magnolia Avenue, the sky had gone from gray-blue to pink-orange, the sun just breaking the horizon. The diner was still dark when she reached it. The neon sign was off. The windows reflected the morning sky. The door was locked. Sophie tried it anyway, pulling on the handle, knowing it wouldn't open, but needing to try. Locked. There was a sign in the window. Open 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. 7 o'clock. That was more than an hour away. Sophie sat down on the curb in front of the diner and waited. The city woke up around her in degrees. More cars, more people. The sky went from pink to yellow to blue. The air warmed slightly, though not enough to stop her from shivering. At 6:15, a delivery truck pulled up, and a man in a brown uniform carried boxes of produce to the back door of the diner. He glanced at Sophie but didn't say anything. At 6:30, more people appeared on the sidewalks. The Monday morning rush, people in business clothes carrying coffee cups, walking fast, eyes on their phones. A woman in a gray suit stepped over Sophie's outstretched legs without breaking stride. A man in a tie and a long coat looked right at her, made eye contact for half a second, then looked away and kept walking. Two teenagers on skateboards rolled past, laughing about something, not seeing her at all. 15 minutes passed. 20, 30. Sophie sat on the curb in front of Riverside Diner with her pink backpack beside her, and not one person stopped to ask if she was okay. At 7 o'clock exactly, the lights inside the diner came on. Sophie stood up, grabbed her backpack, and waited by the door. A minute later, she heard the lock turn. The door opened. A woman in an apron looked down at her, surprised. "We're not quite open yet, hun. Give us 10 minutes. "I need to talk to Angie," Sophie said. Her voice sounded smaller than she wanted it to. The woman's expression shifted, taking in Sophie's age, the backpack, the fact that she was alone. "Angie's in back. Who are you?" "Sophie. Sophie Calloway. My mom works here." Recognition dawned. "Claire's girl. Where's your mama?" "That's what I need to talk to Angie about." The woman hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come on in." The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease and maple syrup, the smell of 1,000 breakfasts. Sophie had always liked it before. Now it just made her stomach hurt with emptiness. Angie emerged from the kitchen, still tying her apron. She had red hair pulled back in a ponytail, 3 earrings in each earrings on 6 of her fingers. When she saw Sophie, her face went through the same shift as the other woman's. Surprise, concern, confusion. "Sophie, what are you doing here? Where's your mom?" Sophie's throat felt tight. She swallowed. "I don't know. She left Friday night to go to the grocery store. She didn't come back." Angie's hand went to her mouth. "Friday, Sophie, that was 3 days ago." "I know. Where have you been? Have you been alone this whole time?" Sophie nodded. "Oh, honey." Angie crouched down to Sophie's level, her face now inches away, searching. "Did your mom say anything before she left? Anything about where she was going besides the store?" "Just the store, Martin's Market. She took the list." "Did she show up for her shift Saturday?" Sophie shook her head. "She didn't call in." "I don't know. I was at home, waiting." Angie's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. She reached out and squeezed Sophie's shoulder gently. Okay, sweetheart, listen to me. This is not okay. You can't be alone like this. Do you have any family? Anybody we can call?" "No, just Mom. Friends, neighbors. Mrs. Patterson lives upstairs." "You have her number." Sophie recited it from memory. 7 digits she had memorized in case of emergency. Angie wrote it down on her order pad. "You hungry?" Sophie was, desperately. but she shook her head anyway. I'm going to make you something, Angie said. It wasn't a question. She stood up and called back to the kitchen. Anyone's special. Make it quick. She led Sophie to a booth in the back corner, the one Claire always put her in when Sophie visited. The vinyl seat was patched with duct tape in two places. The table was formica worn at the edges. Sophie slid onto the bench and set her backpack beside her. Angie slid in across from her. Sophie, I need you to understand something. Your mom would never just leave you. Claire loves you more than anything in the world. If she's not here, it's because something happened. Something that's keeping her from getting back. I know, Sophie said. That's why I have to find her. That's not your job, honey. You're 7 years old. I'm the only one looking. Angie was quiet for a moment, then she nodded slowly. Okay, let me make some calls. I'm going to call Mrs. Patterson and I'm going to call the police and we're going to figure this out. But you need to eat first. A plate arrived. Scrambled eggs, toast bacon, a small bowl of fruit. More food than Sophie had seen in 2 days. She picked up her fork and started eating mechanically, not tasting, just filling the empty space inside her. Angie made her calls. Sophie could hear her voice at the counter, low and urgent, talking to someone. Then silence while she listened. Then more talking. When she came back, her face was tight. Mrs. Patterson said she heard your mom leave Friday night. She hasn't seen her since. I called the police too. They're sending someone. I need to keep looking, Sophie said. Sophie, she's at the grocery store, or near it. That's where she was going. I need to go there. The police will check. I need to go. I know what she looks like. I can find her. Angie looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small notepad the kind servers use for orders. She wrote something on it, tore off the page, and slid it across the table. A phone number. That's my cell. You call me if you need anything. Anything at all. Promise me. I promise. The police are on their way. You should wait here. But Sophie was already sliding out of the booth, already putting her arms through her backpack straps. Thank you for the food. Sophie wait, but Sophie was moving, walking toward the door, her hand on the handle. At least take this. Angie pressed something into her hand, a $20 bill. Please, for food, for whatever you need. Sophie looked at the money, looked at Angie, nodded once and put it in her backpack's front pocket. Then she was outside, back on Magnolia Avenue, the morning sun higher now, the city fully awake. She walked. Martin's Market was 8 blocks from the diner. Sophie knew this because her mother had told her once. 8 blocks, which is nothing on a nice day. But it was 8 blocks when you were 7 and your legs were tired and your backpack was pulling at your shoulders. She walked anyway. The market was one of those old neighborhood groceries, not a big chain, just a single store with narrow aisles and produce displays on the sidewalk and handwritten signs in the windows. Sophie stood outside and looked at it, tried to imagine her mother here Friday night. Shopping cart, grocery list, walking the aisles, picking items. She went inside. The air conditioning was too cold. The fluorescent lights were too bright. A bored-looking teenager stood behind the register, scrolling on his phone. Sophie walked up to him. Excuse me. He looked down. Yeah. I'm looking for my mom. She came here Friday night. She has brown, wavy hair and green eyes, and she's this tall. Sophie held her hand up above her own head, estimating. Lady, that's like half the people who come in here. Her name is Claire Calloway. Don't know her. She had a grocery list, milk, bread, eggs, peanut butter, apples. The teenager shrugged. I don't work Fridays. Who does? Travis, maybe, I don't know. He's not here now. When will he be here? Tonight. 7. Tonight was forever away. Sophie turned and walked back outside. She tried 3 more stores. A different grocery smaller, a convenience store, a corner market that smelled like old vegetables. At each one, she asked the same questions, showed her determination through 7-year-old persistence, got the same answers. Nobody knew. Nobody had seen. Nobody could help. By early afternoon, Sophie's feet hurt. Blisters were forming on both heels where her sneakers rubbed. Her shoulders ached from the backpack. She was thirsty and tired, and the city felt enormous around her. Too big, too many people, too many streets going in too many directions. She found a gas station and bought a bottle of water and a package of crackers with some of Angie's $20. She sat on the curb behind the building and ate and drank and tried not to cry. The sun was brutal despite the October air. The pavement radiated heat. Cars came and went, people pumping A's, buying cigarettes, nobody looking at the small girl with the pink backpack sitting alone behind the building. Sophie checked her internal map, the one she had been building in her head. She was 12 blocks from home now. Maybe more. In a direction she didn't quite recognize. The buildings here were different, lower, older. The streets had different names. She stood up, wincing at the pain in her feet, and started walking. She needed to get back toward Magnolia Avenue, towards something familiar. She chose a direction that felt right and walked. 3 blocks. 4. The buildings got older, more rundown, boarded windows and chain-link fences and graffiti tags on brick walls. The sidewalks were emptier here, fewer people, different kind of quiet. Sophie kept walking. The sun was starting to set when she realized she was lost. Really lost. Not just turned around lost, but completely unsure where she was lost. The street signs meant nothing to her. The buildings were all unfamiliar. The light was fading fast, that quick autumn fade from afternoon to twilight. She was on a street called Central Avenue. She knew this only because she could read the sign. But she didn't know which direction home was. Didn't know which direction anything was. Her feet hurt so badly now that every step was a small, sharp pain. Her shoulders were numb from the backpack straps. She was so tired she could barely think straight. And then ahead of her she saw it. A building, brick windows, dark, obviously closed. A pawn shop, the sign said. 3 balls hanging from a metal bracket. The door was boarded over. But beside the door against the brick wall, there was a small sheltered space. Out of the wind, out of sight from the street if you weren't looking. Sophie walked to it, set down her backpack, looked around. The street was empty. The sun was almost gone. The temperature was dropping fast. She was so tired. She sat down her back against the brick wall. It was cold against her spine, even through her jacket. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. From her backpack, she took out her jacket, the thin windbreaker she had packed. She put it on, zipping it all the way up, pulling the hood over her head. Then she did something she had seen on the news once, a story about people who slept on the streets. She took the backpack and threaded her arm through one of the straps, looping it around her wrist once, twice, pulling it snug. If she fell asleep, at least nobody could take it without waking her. At least she wouldn't lose the only thing she had left. The drawing, the photograph, the money, the clothes. Everything. She curled onto her side on the cold concrete, her head on her arm, the backpack pulled close against her chest. And Sophie Calloway, 7 years old, closed her eyes and tried very hard not to cry and failed and cried silently into her jacket sleeve until she finally fell asleep. The darkness came down over Central Avenue like a curtain. The street light above her flickered on, casting orange shadows. A car passed, then another, then silence. Nobody stopped. Nobody slowed. Nobody saw the small figure curled against the brick wall of a shuttered pawn shop with a pink backpack wrapped around her wrist and tear tracks drying on her cheeks. The night passed in cold and silence, in dreams that Sophie would not remember when she woke. And when she did wake, it would be to the sound of engines. 22 of them deep and rumbling coming down Central Avenue like rolling thunder on a Tuesday morning in October. Coming closer, getting louder. Until they stopped. Until one man on one motorcycle saw what everyone else had walked past. Until someone finally looked. The sound came first before Sophie was fully awake. A low rumble that started at the edge of hearing and grew layered and constant, like distant thunder that refused to move on. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the pale morning light, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then the cold concrete beneath her registered, the brick wall against her back, the ache in her shoulders and hips from sleeping on hard ground, the pink backpack still wrapped around her wrist, cutting off circulation slightly, her hand tingling. Tuesday morning, Central Avenue, she remembered. The rumble grew louder, closer, resolving itself into distinct sounds. Engines, multiple engines, moving in formation. Sophie sat up, blinking against the low sun that was just breaking over the buildings across the street. She unwound the backpack strap from her wrist, wincing as blood flow returned to her fingers, and looked toward the source of the noise. Motorcycles. A long line of them coming down Central Avenue in a tight column chrome glinting in the early light. Big bikes, the kind with wing handlebars and engines that rumble deep enough to feel in your chest. 20 of them at least, maybe more. Men and women in leather jackets and denim bandanas and sunglasses despite the early hour. Patches on their backs, colors Sophie couldn't quite read from this distance. The column was slowing. Sophie got to her feet quickly, grabbing her backpack, her heart suddenly hammering. She didn't know if this was good or bad, safe or dangerous. Her mother's voice in her head, if you see trouble, you walk the other way. You don't run. Running attracts attention, but you walk fast and you don't look back. But the motorcycles were already stopping. One by one, engines cutting the roar, dying down to individual rumbles and then silence. Too late to walk away now. They had seen her. At the front of the column, a man swung his leg over his bike and pulled off his helmet. He was big, broad-shouldered, maybe 40-something, with dark hair going gray at the temples and a beard that had more silver than black. Tattoos covered both arms from wrist to shoulder, disappearing under the sleeves of his black t-shirt. His leather vest had a patch on the back that said Iron Wings MC and below it President. He looked directly at Sophie. She looked back, her mind working fast, assessing, calculating. Was this the kind of person her mother had warned her about, or the kind who might help? She couldn't tell yet, so she stayed very still and watched him approach. He walked slowly, his hands visible at his sides, nothing threatening in his posture. When he was about 10 feet away, he stopped. "Morning," he said. His voice was low and rough like gravel tumbling in a can. Sophie said nothing. "You okay?" he asked. Still nothing. She was trying to read him, trying to see past the size and the tattoos and the leather to whatever was underneath. He crouched down, making himself smaller, less imposing. Now they were closer to eye level. "My name's Jackson," he said. "Most people call me Jax. What's your name?" Sophie's hands tightened on the backpack straps. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "This is a public sidewalk." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. Like he had just confirmed something he suspected. "Nobody said you were doing anything wrong," he said gently. "I'm just checking to make sure you're all right." "I'm fine. You sleep here last night?" She didn't answer. "When did you eat last?" Still no answer, but something must have shown on her face because he nodded slowly and looked back over his shoulder. A woman had dismounted from one of the bikes in the middle of the column. She was in her late 30s with dark blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and a leather jacket that fit her like it was custom made. She walked over to them, moving with the same careful, non-threatening energy. "This is Harper," Jack said. "Harper, you got anything to eat in your pockets?" Harper reached into her jacket without a word and pulled out a granola bar. She held it out to Sophie. Sophie looked at it, looked at Harper, looked at Jax. Her stomach was a tight knot of hunger. She had eaten the last of the Wine Station crackers yesterday afternoon. That was almost 18 hours ago. She took the granola bar. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her mother had taught her manners. Always say please and thank you even when you're worried, especially when you're scared. "You're welcome," Harper said. She had a kind face, Sophie thought. Tired around the eyes, but kind. Sophie peeled open the wrapper and bit into the bar. It was oats and honey and something that might have been chocolate chips. She ate it slowly, making it last while the two adults waited. Behind them, the other riders were dismounting, stretching, talking in low voices. But nobody came closer. They all seemed to understand that crowding her would be a mistake. "What's your name?" Jax asked again. This time Sophie answered. "Sophie." "Sophie, that's a good name," he paused. "How old are you, Sophie?" "7." His jaw tightened just slightly. "7, okay. Where are your parents?" "My mom." Sophie swallowed the last bite of granola bar. "I don't have a dad, just my mom." "Where's your mom now?" This was the hard part, the part Sophie had been dreading. Because once she said it out loud to an adult, things would happen. Phone calls would be made, systems would activate. She might lose control of the situation entirely. But looking at Jax, at the way he was still crouched down to her level, at the concern in his eyes that seemed real and not just polite, she made a decision. "I don't know," she said. "She left Friday night to go to the grocery store. She didn't come back." Jax went very still. "Friday night, 3 days ago." "Yes. And you've been alone since then." "I waited at home Saturday and Sunday. Then yesterday I went looking for her." "Looking how?" "I went to the diner where she works. I went to the grocery store she was going to. I walked around trying to find her." Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, reporting information. "I got lost. I ended up here. It was dark and I was tired, so I slept." Harper had her hand over her mouth. Behind her, some of the other riders had gone quiet, clearly listening. "Sophie," Jack said carefully, "has anybody been taking care of you? Any neighbors? Any family?" "No family, just Mom. There's Mrs. Patterson upstairs, but I didn't want to bother her." "You didn't want to bother her," Jax repeated slowly, like he was trying to make the words make sense. "She's old. She has her own problems." Jax looked at Harper. Something passed between them, some kind of silent communication that adults seem to be able to do without words. Harper pulled out a cell phone and stepped away, already dialing. "Sophie," Jax said, "we're going to help you, okay? Harper's calling the police and social services, people who can help find your mom." Sophie's heart jumped. "I don't want to go to foster care." "Nobody's talking about foster care right now. We're just going to get some people here who know how to help with this kind of situation." "I need to keep looking for my mom." "I understand that, but you're 7 years old and you've been on your own for 3 days. That's not safe, you know that, right?" Sophie did know that, but knowing it and accepting it were different things. She watched Harper on the phone, pacing back and forth, her voice low and urgent. She watched the other riders standing by their bikes, watching her, their faces showing various shades of concern and anger and sadness. It was only then that Sophie realized something strange. In the 15 minutes or so since the motorcycles had pulled up, at least a dozen other people had walked past on the sidewalk. A man in a business suit talking on his phone, a woman pushing a stroller, two teenagers on skateboards, an elderly couple walking slowly arm in arm. Not one of them had stopped. Not one had even slowed down to look at the small girl with the pink backpack standing among the bikers. They had walked past like she was invisible. But these people, these strangers on motorcycles, they had stopped. Jack seemed to notice her noticing. "We run a charity ride every year," he said. "First Tuesday in October, raise money for kids in need. We were on our way to the starting point when I saw you." "Why did you stop?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because you looked like you needed help." Nobody else stopped. "I know." Something dark crossed his face. "Believe me, I know." Harper came back, pocketing her phone. "Police are on their way. Social worker too. 10-15 minutes. Jax nodded. "You want to sit down while we wait?" he asked Sophie. She shook her head. Sitting meant staying still. Staying still meant thinking. Thinking meant feeling all the things she had been pushing down for 3 days. "Can I ask you something?" she said instead. "Man." "Sure. What's your charity ride for? You said kids in need." "Yeah, we collect money, buy school supplies, coats for winter, that kind of thing. Give it to families who can't afford it." "Why?" Jack shifted his weight, thinking about how to answer. "Because some of us didn't have anybody looking out for us when we were kids. We know what that feels like. So now we try to look out for others." Sophie absorbed this. Were you in foster care? He blinked surprised. Yeah, how'd you know? You said you didn't have anybody. That's what foster care means. That's right. He studied her face. You're pretty smart. My mom says I notice things. Your mom's right. There was a pause. Then Sophie opened her backpack and reached inside. She pulled out the folded piece of paper, the drawing, and held it for a moment before unfolding it. The two crayon figures stood hand in hand under their yellow sun. Me and Mom written at the bottom in careful letters. She showed it to Jax. He looked at it for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than before. You made this for her birthday last month. It's really good. I brought it with me, Yofi said, in case I needed to remember what she looks like. But I don't need it for that. I know exactly what she looks like. I just wanted to have it with me. Jax nodded slowly. His eyes had gone soft in a way that made him look younger and older at the same time. Sophie, can I tell you something? Okay. I believe you when you say your mom wouldn't just leave. I believe that something happened to her. And I promise you we're going to help figure out what. You don't have to just say that, Sophie said. Her mother's words, don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not just saying it, I mean it. She looked at him and decided he was telling the truth. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. In the distance, a siren was beginning to wind its way through the morning traffic. The police arrived first, a young officer named Ramirez, maybe late 20s, who pulled up in a patrol car and got out looking uncertain about what he was walking into. 22 motorcycles and a small girl with a pink backpack was apparently not what he had been expecting. Harper met him at the curb and gave him the summary. Sophie could hear pieces of it. 7 years old, alone since Friday, mother missing, no family. The officer's expression went from uncertain to grim. He approached Sophie carefully the way Jax had, making himself non-threatening. Hi there, I'm Officer Ramirez. What's your name? Sophie Calloway. Sophie and I'm going to need to ask you some questions, okay? Just to help us figure out what's going on and how we can help. Okay. He pulled out a small notepad. Can you tell me your address? Sophie recited it. The officer wrote it down. And your mom's name, Claire Calloway. How old is your mom? 29. When did you last see her? Friday at 6 o'clock. She left to go to Martin's Market. She said she'd be back by bedtime. Did she say anything else? Anything about going anywhere other than the market? No, just the market. And you haven't seen or heard from her since? No. Officer Ramirez wrote steadily. You said you've been alone since Friday. Where have you been staying? At home until yesterday. Then I went looking for her. Looking where? The diner where she works, the grocery store, around. Did you talk to anyone? Anyone who might have seen her? I talked to Angie at the diner. She said Mom didn't show up for her shift Saturday. I talked to people at stores, but nobody knew anything. The officer looked up from his notepad. Sophie, do you have any other family, grandparents, aunts, uncles? No, just Mom. Friends of your mom's neighbors. Mrs. Patterson lives upstairs. Angie from the diner. That's all I know. Okay. He closed the notepad. Here's what's going to happen. A social worker is on her way. Her name is Margaret. She's going to talk to you and make sure you have a safe place to stay while we look for your mom. I'm going to put out a missing person report, and we're going to start checking hospitals, shelters, anywhere your mom might be. What if you don't find her? Officer Ramirez hesitated. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it, but right now we're focused on finding her. Another car pulled up, a beige sedan, practical and worn, with a car seat in the back and a stack of manila folders on the passenger seat. The woman who got out was in her mid-50s with graying hair pulled back in a bun and glasses on a chain around her neck. She wore slacks and a cardigan and sensible shoes, and she moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this job for a very long time. Margaret Winters, she said, shaking Officer Ramirez's hand, then Jax's, then crouching down in front of Sophie. And you must be Sophie. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, your mother taught you manners. Yes, ma'am. Margaret smiled just a little. Sophie, I'm a social worker. Do you know what that means? You help kids who don't have families. That's part of it. I also help kids whose families are in trouble. Kids who need someone to make sure they're safe and taken care of while the grown-ups figure things out. I'm fine. I can see you're a very capable young lady, but 7-year-olds aren't supposed to take care of themselves. It's not fair to you and it's not safe. Sophie said nothing. I need to ask you some questions. Some of them might be the same ones Officer Ramirez already asked. Is that okay? Okay. Margaret pulled out her own notepad and pen. She asked about Claire, about the apartment, about school, about friends and neighbors and anyone who might know where Claire had gone. She asked about the last 3 days, and Sophie recounted them in the same matter-of-fact voice she had used with everyone else. As she spoke, Margaret wrote her face remaining neutral and professional, though Sophie noticed her hand tighten on the pen when Sophie described sleeping on the sidewalk. When Sophie finished, Margaret set down her notepad. Sophie, I need to find you a safe place to stay tonight. Somewhere warm with food, with people who can take care of you while we search for your mom. Do you understand? You mean foster care. Emergency placement, yes, just temporarily. What if my mom comes back and I'm not there? We'll leave information at your apartment. We'll make sure she knows exactly where you are. What if she can't find me? She'll be able to find you, I promise. Sophie looked at the ground. Her hands were shaking slightly. She clasped them together to make it stop. Can I leave her a message? She asked quietly. At the apartment. So when she comes back, she'll know I didn't just leave. She'll know I was looking for her. Margaret's professional mask slipped for just a second, something raw and sad crossing her face before she controlled it. Yes, she said. Yes, we can do that. Sophie nodded. Jax, who had been standing back during the questioning, stepped forward. Ma'am, I know you have procedures to follow, but if it's all right, I'd like to make a few calls. Get some help searching for this girl's mother. Margaret looked at him, assessing. What kind of help? The motorcycle community in Tennessee is pretty tight. We got people in every major city, lots of smaller towns too. If I put the word out, we can have eyes looking in places the police might not get to right away. That's appreciated, but this is an official investigation now. I understand. I'm not suggesting we interfere. Just supplement. More people looking means better chances of finding her. Margaret considered. As long as you stay within legal bounds and coordinate with law enforcement, I don't see a problem with it. Fair enough. Jax pulled out his phone and stepped away. Officer Ramirez was already on his radio calling in the missing person report. Sophie could hear fragments of it. Female age 29, brown wavy hair, green eyes, last seen Friday evening. Harper appeared beside Margaret. I've got some emergency supplies in my saddlebag. Protein bars, water bottles, first aid kit. Want me to get them? That would be helpful, thank you. Sophie watched all this activity swirl around her. Adults doing adult things, systems activating, procedures being followed at times. She felt very small and very tired and very much like she was losing control of the situation. Margaret noticed. She sat down on the curb beside Sophie, not saying anything, just being present. After a moment, Sophie spoke. What happens if you don't find my mom in a few days? Margaret didn't sugarcoat it. If we don't locate her quickly, we start looking into more permanent arrangements for you. You mean I'd stay in foster care? Potentially. For how long? I don't know, Sophie. Every situation is different. Sophie pulled her backpack closer to her chest. She didn't leave. She wouldn't do that. I believe you. Do you really, or are you just saying that? Margaret looked at her. My job is to keep kids safe. That means sometimes I have to assume the worst so I can plan for it. But that doesn't mean I think you're wrong about your mom. It just means I need to make sure you're taken care of no matter what happens. It was the most honest thing any adult had said to Sophie in 3 days. She appreciated it even though it scared her. Jax came back, pocketing his phone. I've got 4 clubs on alert. Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Bristol. They're spreading the word. If Claire Calloway is anywhere in Tennessee, we'll have people looking. That was fast, Margaret said. That's how we operate. The morning had fully arrived now. The sun was higher, the air warming slightly. Traffic on Central Avenue was picking up. People on their way to work going about their Tuesday routines completely unaware of the small drama playing out on the sidewalk. Margaret stood up. Sophie, I need to take you to a placement home now. A man named Reverend Frank Montgomery. He's been a foster parent for over 20 years. He's got a nice house, a safe neighborhood. You'll have your own room, regular meals. He's a good man. Can I take my backpack? Of course. Everything you have is yours to keep. Sophie stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff from sleeping on concrete. Her feet still hurt from yesterday's walking. She put her arms through the backpack straps and adjusted them. Jax crouched down one more time. Sophie, I'm going to be working on finding your mom. Me and a lot of other people. We're not going to stop looking until we know what happened. Okay. Okay. And if you need anything, you tell Margaret, and she'll tell me. Deal. Deal. He held out his hand. After a moment, Sophie shook it. His hand was rough and warm and completely engulfed hers. As Margaret led Sophie toward the sedan, Harper called out, Sophie, wait! Sophie turned. Harper walked over with a small, stuffed animal, a brown teddy bear that looked well-loved. This was my daughter's. She's grown now, doesn't need it anymore. But I carry it for luck. I want you to have it. Sophie took the bear carefully. It was soft and smelled faintly of motorcycle exhaust and leather. Thank you, she said. You're welcome, sweetheart. Sophie got into the back seat of Margaret's car. The social worker started the engine, adjusted the mirror, and pulled away from the curb. As they drove off, Sophie looked back through the rear window. The Iron Wings riders were still there, 22 people she didn't know, standing beside their bikes in the morning sun, watching her go. Jax raised one hand in a small wave. Sophie raised hers back. Then they turned a corner, and the motorcycles disappeared from view. Reverend Frank Montgomery's house was in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Knoxville. Tree-lined streets, modest homes with front porches, cars parked in driveways. The kind of place where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and knew their neighbors' names. The house itself was a small two-story with white siding and blue shutters. A porch swing hung from chains moving slightly in the breeze. Flower boxes under the windows held the last blooms of autumn. Margaret parked in the driveway and came around to open Sophie's door. Ready? She asked. Sophie wasn't, but she got out anyway. The front door opened before they reached it. Reverend Frank Montgomery was a tall, thin man in his late 60s with silver hair and glasses and a cardigan that had leather patches on the elbows. He looked like someone who had spent his life being kind to people. You must be Sophie, he said. His voice was gentle. Welcome. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and something baking. Warm, safe. The kind of smells that meant someone lived here who cared about making a home. I'll give you a tour, Frank said. Margaret has paperwork to do. Boring grown-up stuff. He showed Sophie the living room with its worn couch and overflowing bookshelves, the kitchen with its round table and checkered curtains. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms. His was at the end of the hall. The guest room was in the middle, empty and neutral. And the room next to his, the one he showed her to, was clearly meant for kids. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a bookshelf with children's books, a small desk by the window. Toys on a shelf, though they looked unused, waiting. This is your space, Frank said. Everything here is for you to use. Bathrooms across the hall. If you need anything day or night, my door's open. Sophie set her backpack on the bed. Thank you. Are you hungry? I made cinnamon rolls this morning. She was, always hungry it seemed. Yes, please. Downstairs, Margaret was at the kitchen table with a stack of forms. She looked up when they entered. Sophie, I need to ask you a few more questions for the paperwork. Is that okay? They went through it. Name, date of birth, address, mother's information, school information, medical history, as far as Sophie knew it. Margaret wrote everything down in neat, precise handwriting. Do you take any medications? No. Any allergies? No. Emergency contacts besides your mother? Sophie was quiet. Sophie, I told you there's nobody else. Margaret's pen paused. Then she wrote something and moved on. When the paperwork was done, she stood up to leave. I'll be back to check on you tomorrow. If anything comes up before then, call me. She handed Sophie a business card with her number on it. Will you tell me if you find anything about my mom? The moment I know something, you'll know. After Margaret left, Frank brought out the cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. He poured Sophie a glass of milk and sat across from her at the table. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, he said. But if you do want to talk, I'm a pretty good listener. Comes with the territory. The territory. Being a reverend, people tell me things. Sophie ate her cinnamon roll slowly. It was good, really good. Butter and sugar and cinnamon in perfect proportion. How long have you done foster care? She asked. About 23 years now. Had 47 kids come through over the years. Some stayed a few days, some stayed a few years. Each one special. Where are they now? All over. Some got reunited with their families. Some got adopted. Some aged out and went on their own way. I keep in touch with most of them. 47 kids. Sophie tried to imagine it. That many different stories, that many different hurts. 48 now, counting you. I'm not staying long. My mom's coming back. Frank nodded. I hope you're right. That night, Sophie lay in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room listening to unfamiliar sounds. The house settled and creaked. A clock ticked somewhere. Outside wind moved through the trees. She took out her drawing and propped it against the lamp on the nightstand, the two figures hand in hand watching over her in the darkness. I'm safe, Mom, she whispered to it. People are helping. Come find me soon. But the drawing didn't answer, and eventually Sophie fell into an exhausted sleep. Wednesday morning arrived with pale sunlight through the window. Sophie woke disoriented, not knowing where she was, then remembering. Frank's house, foster care, day 5 without her mother. She got up and looked out the window. The neighborhood was waking up. A man walking a dog, a woman getting into her car for work. Normal Wednesday morning things. Sophie went downstairs. Frank was in the kitchen making breakfast, eggs and toast and orange juice. Morning, he said. Sleep okay? Yes, sir. Just Frank is fine. Or Reverend, if you're formal, but not sir. Makes me feel old. After breakfast, the doorbell rang. Margaret was back earlier than expected. Sophie, she said, the police followed up on some of your information. They talked to Angie at the diner and Mrs. Patterson. They checked your apartment. They're expanding the search. Did they find anything? Not yet, but they're looking. Margaret sat down at the table. I need to be honest with you about something. The official window for emergency placement is 72 hours. After that, if we haven't located your mother, we start initiating more permanent proceedings. Sophie's chest tightened. What does that mean? It means we start looking into longer-term foster care, possibly adoption eventually if your mother can't be found. But it's only been, Sophie counted in her head, Friday to today. That's 5 days. The 72-hour clock starts when you were officially placed in care. That was yesterday morning, so we have until Friday morning. That's not enough time. I know it feels that way, but these are the rules I have to work within. Sophie looked at Frank. He looked back with sympathy, but no solutions. Can I help? Sophie asked. Can I keep looking? Sophie, you're 7. The best thing you can do is stay safe and let the professionals work. But professionals didn't know her mother's face the way Sophie did. Professionals hadn't spent 7 years learning every expression, every gesture, every detail. An idea was forming. After Margaret left, Sophie asked Frank for paper and crayons. He brought them without question. Sophie sat at the kitchen table and began to draw. Not a picture this time, a poster. She drew her mother's face from memory, taking her time getting every detail right. The way her hair fell in waves past her shoulders, the shape of her eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen as a kid. When the face was done, she added text in her neatest printing. Missing person Claire Calloway. Age 29, brown wavy hair. Green eyes 5 feet 6 inches. Last seen Friday 6 p.m. near Riverside Diner and Martin's Market. Please call. She wrote Frank's phone number at the bottom. Frank had been watching from the doorway. When she finished, he came over and looked at it. Sophie, he said quietly, that's remarkable. You did that from memory, yes. That's your mother, yes. He studied the drawing. The detail was incredible for a 7-year-old. Every feature captured with an artist's eye for precision. Can I make copies? Sophie asked. At a copy place, I have money. Frank considered. As a foster parent, he had rules to follow, but he also had a heart that could break. I'll do you one better, he said. I have a printer. We'll make as many as you want. They made 30 copies. Sophie watched them come out of the machine one by one, each one a perfect reproduction of her mother's face looking out at whoever would see it. What are you going to do with them? Frank asked. Find people who can help. What people? Sophie thought about the motorcycles, about Jax and Harper, and the way they had stopped when nobody else did. The people who showed up. That afternoon, Frank drove Sophie to Eastside Motors, the address Jax had written on the back of Harper's business card before they left Central Avenue. The shop was in an industrial area, a low building with a garage bay and a parking lot full of motorcycles. The sign above the door said Eastside Motors, custom builds and repair. Inside, the air smelled like motor oil and metal, and something burning that might have been welding. Hard rock played from a radio somewhere. 3 bikes were in various states of disassembly parts spread across workbenches. Jax was in the back, bent over an engine, his hands covered in grease. He looked up when the bell above the door chimed. When he saw Sophie, he straightened immediately, wiping his hands on a rag. Sophie, wasn't expecting to see you. I made something. She held out one of the flyers. I need help giving them out. He took it, studied it. His expression shifted as he took in the detail of the drawing. You drew this, yes. This is your mom. Yes, I need to put them everywhere. The diner, the stores, the hospital, everywhere. So people will see and maybe remember. Jax looked at Frank, who gave a small nod. Then Jax looked back at Sophie and made a decision. All right, he said, let's get organized. He made a phone call, then another, then 3 at once. Within an hour, the shop was full of people, Iron Wings members, friends, people who had heard about the girl who slept on the sidewalk and wanted to help. Harper arrived with a map of Knoxville spread across the hood of someone's truck. She divided the city into sections with a marker. Hospitals first, she said, then diners and restaurants, then grocery stores and shelters. Teams formed, 5 groups of riders, each taking a section of the city, each with a stack of Sophie's flyers. Sophie watched them organize these strangers who had no reason to care but clearly did. Before they left, Jax crouched down in front of her. We're going to put these everywhere, he said. Somebody out there knows something. We just have to find them. The riders dispersed. Sophie waited at the shop with Frank, watching the clock, hoping. At 7 o'clock that evening, Jack's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression going neutral, in the way people's faces do when they're controlling their reaction. When he hung up, he looked at Sophie. That was a manager from Martin's Market, night shift guy. He remembers Friday. Sophie's heart jumped. What did he say? He said there was an accident outside the store Friday evening. Around 6:30, a car hit a pedestrian. Woman with grocery bags. Ambulance came. Sophie stopped breathing. He didn't see her face, but the timing matches, the location matches. Which hospital? Her voice was barely a whisper. He said Knox General. It's protocol for that district. Jax was already moving, grabbing his keys. Frank, can you bring her? Already heading to the car. The drive to Knox General Hospital took 12 minutes. Sophie counted every one of them, her hands clutching the teddy bear Harper had given her heart hammering against her ribs. Jax met them in the parking lot. Together, they went inside to the information desk where a tired-looking receptionist looked up from her computer. "We're looking for a patient," Jack said. "Claire Calloway. She would have been brought in Friday night. Car accident." The receptionist typed, frowned, typed more. "I don't have anyone by that name." Sophie's heart sank. "Check Jane Doe's," Jack said. "Unidentified patients." More typing. Then the receptionist's expression changed. "We have a Jane Doe admitted Friday evening, 6:47 p.m. hit-and-run victim. She's in room 412. "Can we see her?" Sophie asked. "Are you family?" "I'm her daughter." The receptionist looked at her, then at Frank, then at Jax. Protocol said one thing. Humanity said another. "Fourth floor, room 412. They took the elevator in silence. Sophie's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to make it stop. The fourth floor was quiet, fluorescent lights and beige walls and the smell of disinfectant. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. Jack stopped at the door. "You want me to check first?" Sophie shook her head. She had come this far. She needed to see. He pushed open the door. The woman in the bed was thin and pale, her left arm in a sling, a line of stitches running along her jaw. Her brown hair spread across the pillow. Her eyes were closed. But Sophie knew that face, had drawn that face from memory just hours ago. "Mom," she whispered, and Claire Calloway's eyes opened. The world narrowed to a single point. Everything else fell away. The hospital room, the fluorescent lights, the steady beep of monitors, the presence of Jax and Frank standing behind her. All of it disappeared except for the woman in the bed whose eyes had just opened. Green eyes, the same shade as Sophie's own. "Mom," Sophie said again, louder this time, and she was moving before she knew it, crossing the room in 3 running steps, climbing onto the bed, careful of the sling and the IV line and the bandages, but needing to be close, needing to touch, needing to confirm this was real. Claire's good arm came around her, pulling her in, and Sophie buried her face in her mother's shoulder and finally let herself fall apart. The crying came from somewhere deep, someplace Sophie had been holding closed and locked for 5 days. Great shaking sobs that hurt her chest and made her whole body tremble. She cried for Friday night and Saturday's waiting and Sunday's growing fear. For Monday's search and Monday night on the cold sidewalk. For Tuesday morning and Wednesday's desperate hope. For all of it, Claire was crying too, her tears falling into Sophie's hair, her hands stroking Sophie's back, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I tried to get back to you. I tried so hard." They stayed like that for a long time. Minutes, maybe. Time didn't work right when you were being put back together. Eventually, Sophie lifted her head. Her face was wet and her nose was running, and she didn't care. Her mother was here, alive, real. "You're okay," Sophie said. It was half statement, half question. "I'm okay now." Claire's voice was hoarse, like she'd been screaming. Maybe she had been. "Are you Sophie? Where have you been? I've been asking about you since Tuesday night, and nobody knew anything. I was at home. Then I went looking for you." "You went looking?" Claire's eyes widened. "Sophie, you're 7 years old. You didn't come back. I waited and waited, and you didn't come back, and I thought something bad happened, so I went to find you." Claire looked past Sophie to where Jax and Frank stood by the door. "Who are you?" Jack stepped forward slightly. "Jackson Brennan, ma'am. I found Sophie yesterday morning on Central Avenue. She'd been sleeping outside." The color drained from Claire's already pale face. Sleeping outside Sophie. "I got lost," Sophie said. "I was trying to find you and I got turned around and it was dark and I was tired." "Oh my God." Claire's hand tightened on Sophie's back. "You were alone for how long? Since Friday?" "I waited at home Saturday and Sunday. I had crackers and peanut butter. Then Monday I went looking." "Monday," Claire's voice cracked. "You've been on your own for 5 days. I knew you wouldn't just leave. I knew something happened." You're right. Something happened. Claire looked at Jax again. Friday night I was walking back from Martin's market. I had the groceries, I was almost home. A car came out of nowhere. I don't remember much after that. I woke up here Tuesday night. I've been screaming for help about my daughter ever since, but nobody believed me. I didn't have ID, my purse was gone. They thought I was confused from the head injury. A nurse appeared in the doorway. She looked surprised to see visitors. Then her expression softened when she saw Sophie. "You're Claire's daughter," she said. "Yes, ma'am. We've been trying to find you. Your mothers have been asking about you constantly. We tried to locate you, but we didn't have enough information." "She filed a missing person report," Jack said. "From her hospital bed, nobody followed up." The nurse looked uncomfortable. "I'll get the doctor." She disappeared. Sophie looked back at her mother. "They wouldn't listen to you. They thought I was making you up. Trauma from the accident," they said. "Hallucinations." Claire's eyes were fierce. "But I knew you were real. I knew you were out there somewhere, scared and alone, and I couldn't get to you." "I wasn't scared." Sophie said it automatically, the way she'd been saying it to herself for 5 days. Then more honestly, "Okay, I was scared, but I kept looking anyway." "My brave girl." Claire pulled her close again. "You're the bravest person I know." The doctor arrived, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a stethoscope around her neck. She looked at the scene, Sophie on the bed, Claire crying, the two men by the door, and pieced it together. "This is your daughter." "This is Sophie," Claire said. "This is my daughter. She's real. She's here." The doctor had the grace to look chagrined. "Ms. Calloway, I owe you an apology. We should have taken your concerns more seriously. You should have believed me." "You're right, I'm sorry." She approached the bed, checking Claire's monitors. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a car, but better now. The injuries aren't severe, all things considered. Broken left radius, some bruising, the laceration on your jaw that we stitched up, mild concussion. You were very lucky. When can I leave?" "We'd like to keep you another day or two for observation. Head injuries are unpredictable." "I need to take care of my daughter." "Your daughter needs you healthy. A few more days won't." "She's been alone for 5 days because of this hospital's mistakes." Claire's voice went hard. "I'm not staying here longer than I have to." The doctor opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "We'll reassess tomorrow. For now, just rest. Both of you." She left. Frank cleared his throat gently. "Ms. Calloway, I'm Frank Montgomery. Sophie's been staying at my house. I'm a licensed foster care provider." Claire's eyes went wide. "Foster care? They put her in foster care." "Emergency placement," Frank said quickly, "just to make sure she was safe while people look for you. She's been well cared for, I promise." "I'm sure she has. I am not angry at you. I'm angry at—" She gestured vaguely at the hospital, the world, the circumstances. "Everything. Understandable." Margaret Winters arrived 20 minutes later, summoned by a call from Frank. She stood in the doorway, taking in the reunion, and something in her professional mask cracked. "Miss Calloway, I'm Margaret Winters, the social worker assigned to Sophie's case. I'm very glad you've been found." "So am I. I need to do some paperwork to close the emergency placement, and we should discuss next steps." "Next steps. You'll need a few days to recover. Sophie will need to stay somewhere safe until you're discharged." "She stays here, with me." Margaret glanced at the doctor who had reappeared in the hallway. The doctor shook her head slightly. "Hospital policy doesn't really allow—" "I don't care about hospital policy," Claire said. "My daughter has been alone for 5 days. She's not leaving my sight." "Miss Calloway." "She stays." There was a long pause. Then the doctor sighed. "I'll see what I can do. Maybe we can bring in a cot." After the official people left, Jax approached the bed. "Miss Calloway, I want you to know that Sophie handled herself incredibly well. She's smart and resourceful, and she never gave up on finding you." "She takes after her mother," Claire said with a weak smile. Then more seriously, "Thank you for stopping, for helping a girl. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. I think she would have figured it out eventually, but I'm glad I could help. Sophie, still curled against her mother's side, spoke up. Jack's got other people to help too. Lots of people. How many people? Jax and Frank exchanged a look. We put the word out through the motorcycle community, Jack said. A lot of folks wanted to help search for you. How many? Last count around 400 riders confirmed they're available if we need them. Claire blinked. 400 people? For us? They heard about Sophie, about what she did. It inspired them. Sophie sat up slightly. Jax, can I ask you something? Sure. You said you were doing a charity ride for kids in need. That's right. Can we still do it, but not just a ride? Can we celebrate that mom's okay, that we found each other? Jax thought about it. You want 500 bikers celebrating in the streets? I want everyone to know that you don't give up, that communities show up, that hope works. Something passed across Jack's face. He looked at Frank, then at Claire. What do you think, Ms. Calloway, your daughter wants to organize a parade? Claire looked down at Sophie, at her determined face, at the hope shining in her eyes. I think, Claire said slowly, that sounds perfect. The next 3 days moved in a blur of planning and healing and slow returns to normal. Claire was discharged Thursday afternoon with strict instructions to rest. Margaret facilitated the paperwork to close Sophie's emergency placement. The hospital issued a formal apology for not taking Claire's concerns seriously and promised policy reviews. Someone from the Iron Wings MC, a woman named Harper that Sophie remembered from Tuesday morning, had arranged for a temporary apartment. 2 bedrooms furnished in a quiet complex on the east side of the city, rent covered for 3 months by a combination of club donations and a nonprofit organization that specialized in emergency family assistance. People you've never met, Harper explained when she handed Claire the keys, decided you deserved a soft place to land. Claire cried when she saw it. Sophie didn't. She was too busy exploring her new room, small but bright, with a bed and a desk and a window that looked out onto a courtyard where kids were playing. Friday morning, Jax called. The ride is set for Sunday, 10 a.m. We'll start at Central Avenue where I found Sophie, end at Knox General so people can see where you were. The route goes through downtown along the waterfront. The city gave us a permit. How many riders? Claire asked. Last count 518. Claire sat down. That's not possible. Apparently it is. Word spread. People want to be part of this. Part of what exactly? Ishgoy? Hope, I guess. A good ending. Something that reminds them why they ride in the first place. Sunday morning came cold and bright. October in Tennessee, the kind of day where your breath mists in the morning and the sun feels warm on your face by noon. Sophie woke early, too excited to sleep. She put on her favorite purple striped shirt and her jeans, and the white sneakers with cartoon characters. She packed her pink backpack even though she didn't need to carry it anymore because it felt right to have it with her. Claire moved slowly, still sore from her injuries, but she managed to get dressed and ready. Margaret had arranged for them to ride in a car at the head of the procession. Frank would drive. They arrived at Central Avenue at 9:30. The street was already filling with motorcycles. Sophie had seen the Iron Wings bikes before, 22 of them on Tuesday morning. But this was different. Bikes stretched in both directions as far as she could see. Hundreds of them. Different makes different colors, different club patches. Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, Bristol. Clubs from across Tennessee and some from neighboring states. Men and women in leather and denim, some older than Frank, some younger than Claire, all there for the same reason. The sound was tremendous. Not loud exactly, most of the engines were idled or off, but present. A low, thrumming potential energy that you could feel in your chest. Sophie got out of Frank's car and looked at them. Jax appeared at her side. What do you think there's so many? 518, like I said. Maybe a few more. People keep arriving. They all came because of me. They came because of you. because of what you did, because it reminded them that sometimes fighting for what matters actually works. A platform had been set up on the sidewalk, just a simple raised area with a microphone. Jax gestured toward it. Want to say something to them? Sophie looked at the crowd, at hundreds of strangers who had driven through the night to be here. I don't know what to say. Tell them what's true. Claire appeared beside her, moving carefully but steady. You don't have to if you don't want to. I want to. Jax lifted Sophie onto the platform. The microphone was adjusted down to her height. The riders, seeing her, began to quiet. Engines cut. Conversation stopped. 518 people turning their attention to one 7-year-old girl with a pink backpack. Sophie's heart hammered. She'd never spoken in front of more than her classroom before, but she thought about the last week, about being alone and scared and determined, about adults who had listened when she spoke, about strangers who had become helpers. She took a breath and spoke into the microphone. My name is Sophie Calloway. I'm 7 years old. Her voice carried across the assembled crowd, clear and small and entirely herself. Last week I thought I lost my mom. She didn't come home and I was really scared. I thought maybe I'd never see her again. Silence. 500 people listening. But I remembered something she always tells me. We never give up on each other. So I didn't give up. I went looking. I got lost and I slept outside and I didn't know what to do. She paused, looked at Jax. Then people helped me. People I didn't know. They stopped when nobody else did. They believed me when I said my mom wouldn't just leave. They helped me find her. Sophie's voice got stronger. My mom says that's what communities do. They show up. They help people who need it, not because they have to, because it's right. She looked out at the sea of faces. You all came here today. 500 people I never met, because you wanted to celebrate that hope works, that not giving up works, that showing up matters. Her voice cracked slightly. Thank you. Thank you for helping me find my mom. Thank you for being the people who stop. She stepped back from the microphone. For a moment there was silence. Then 518 people began to applaud. Some shouted, some whistled, some just clapped with their whole hearts. The sound built and built until it was enormous, until it echoed off the buildings, until Sophie felt it in her bones. Claire was crying. Frank was wiping his eyes. Jax was smiling in a way that looked almost painful. Then the engine started. One by one, 518 motorcycles roared to life. The sound was a physical thing rolling down the street, impossible to ignore. Jax climbed onto his bike at the front of the column. He looked back at Sophie and gave her a thumbs up. She returned it. The procession began to move. Frank drove slowly at the head of the column with Sophie and Claire in the back seat. Behind them, the motorcycles followed in a perfect formation. 8 blocks long, engines synchronized a river of chrome and leather and purpose. They rode through downtown Knoxville, along Central Avenue where Sophie had slept, down to the waterfront where families were out walking, through the business district where people stopped and stared and pulled out phones to record. Sidewalks filled with spectators. People emerged from shops and restaurants. A news crew was filming from the corner of Gay Street. Signs appeared in the crowd. Welcome home, Sophie. Hope wins. Never give up. Sophie watched it all from the car window, her face pressed against the glass, trying to take in every detail. This was happening because of her, because one girl refused to stop looking, because people saw that refusal and decided to honor it. The procession turned onto Summit Hill Drive. The sound of 500 engines echoed between buildings. Car alarms went off from the vibration. Windows rattled. People cheered. Claire's good arm was around Sophie, holding her close. Look what you did, she whispered. Look what you inspired. We did it together, Sophie said. I looked, and you fought to get back, and people helped. Everybody did their part. They approached Knox General Hospital. The procession slowed. One by one, the motorcycles pulled into the parking lot in the surrounding streets, filling every available space. When the engines finally cut, the silence was startling. Sophie got out of the car. The October sun was high now, warm, despite the cold morning. She looked up at the hospital at the fourth-floor window where her mother had been trapped, asking for help that wouldn't come until Sophie made it come. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Hospital staff, curious onlookers, patients who had come out to see what the noise was about. Jax approached with a bullhorn in his hand. "Want to say hi to your mom's window?" Sophie took it. The weight was awkward in her small hands, but she managed. She pointed it up at the fourth floor at room 412 and pressed the button. "Hi, Mom. I brought some friends." Her amplified voice bounced off the building. Claire, standing beside her, laughed and cried at the same time. The crowd cheered. A reporter from Channel 7 approached a woman with perfect hair and a microphone. "Sophie, can I ask you some questions?" Sophie looked at Jax. He nodded. "Okay. What do you want people to know about what happened this week?" Sophie thought about it. "I want them to know that even when things are really scary and really hard, you don't have to face them alone. There are people who will help if you ask, or sometimes even if you don't ask, they'll just show up." "What are you going to do now?" "Go home with my mom, start school again, be a regular kid." "Do you think you'll remember this when you're older?" Sophie looked at the motorcycles. At 500 strangers who had become something like family, at least for today. "Yes," she said, "I'll remember." The reporter thanked her and moved on to interview Jax. Margaret appeared at Claire's side. "I have some information for you. The nonprofit that arranged your housing also connected me with some assistance programs. There's emergency funds available for medical bills, food assistance, a family attorney who's offering pro bono help if you need it." "Why would I need an attorney?" "Just in case. Making sure Sophie stays with you. Making sure you have legal protections. Dotting I's and crossing T's." Claire nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank them." Margaret gestured at the assembled riders. "They organize most of it. The motorcycle community takes care of their own. And apparently they've decided you're theirs now." Over the next hour, people approached. Riders introducing themselves, shaking Claire's hand, telling Sophie they were proud of her. A woman from Chattanooga who worked for a family services nonprofit. A man from Nashville who ran a legal aid clinic. A couple from Memphis who had arranged the housing. Strangers offering help, building a net underneath them so they wouldn't fall. As the crowd began to disperse, Jax pulled Sophie aside. "I have something for you." He handed her a patch, the Iron Wings logo embroidered on leather. "You're an honorary member now. Youngest one we've ever had." Sophie turned it over in her hands. "What does that mean?" "It means you're family. It means if you ever need anything you call. It means we look out for you. Forever. Forever." Sophie put the patch carefully in her backpack. Another treasure to keep. 3 weeks later, Sophie and Claire visited Eastside Motors. Claire was mostly healed now. The sling was gone. The stitches removed just a small scar on her jaw to show what had happened. She was back at work at Riverside Diner, her shifts the same as before, her life resuming its normal patterns. But not quite the same as before. Because now there were phone numbers in her phone of people she could call. Names of neighbors in the new apartment who had introduced themselves. A support system that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. Sophie had something with her. Something she'd been working on every day after school. A drawing, not the small crayon picture she carried in her backpack. This one was large, detailed, done on poster board with markers and colored pencils. It showed Central Avenue from above a bird's eye view. The street ran down the center, and on both sides, stretching back into the distance, were motorcycles. Hundreds of them. And Sophie had drawn every single one. Each bike was different. Different colors, different shapes, different details. And on each bike sat a rider, and each rider had a face. Some were detailed people she remembered. Some were more generic people she hadn't met. But they all had faces, all had features, all were individuals. At the center of the drawing, slightly larger than everything else, stood a small figure with a pink backpack. That was Sophie. She had signed it at the bottom. 518 Friends by Sophie Calloway, age 7. Jack stood in his shop looking at it for a full minute without speaking. Sophie, he said finally, this is incredible. It took me 3 weeks. I can tell the detail is, he shook his head. You gave every bike a rider, every rider a face. Because they all showed up. They all mattered. Can I keep this? That's why I made it, for your shop, so people remember. Jax hung it on the wall facing the entrance. Not high up where adults would see it first, but low at Sophie's eye level. Perfect, he said. Next to it, he hung something else. The flyer Sophie had made that first day, her hand-drawn portrait of her mother with the word missing across the top. Before and after, he explained. Lost and found, despair and hope. Sophie studied the two images side by side, her mother's face seeking, the motorcycles responding. Can I tell you something, she asked Jax. Always. I was really scared, the whole time. I didn't tell anyone because I thought if I said it out loud, it would make it more real. But I was so scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Sophie. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. That's what Mom says, too. Your mom's a smart woman. She is, Sophie paused. Jax, can I ask you something else? Sure. Why did you stop that Tuesday morning? You could have just ridden past like everyone else did. Jax was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. When I was 6 years old, he said, my parents dropped me off at a fire station and never came back. I spent the next 12 years in foster care. Some homes were good, some weren't. But all of them, I felt like I was waiting, like I was temporary, like nobody was really going to keep me. Sophie listened. I aged out at 18. That means I turned 18 and the system was done with me. I was on my own. No family, no support, just me. That's sad. It was, but I met some people, good people, people who saw a kid who needed help and decided to help. They taught me to ride, taught me a trade, gave me a place to belong. He looked down at her. I stopped because I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like when nobody sees you. And I couldn't drive past without seeing you. It would have felt like abandoning myself. Sophie thought about that. I'm glad you stopped. Me too. That spring, the Iron Wings Motorcycle Club announced a new initiative. They called it the Iron Wings Watch. It was a partnership with social services across 3 East Tennessee counties, a system where the motorcycle community could serve as extra eyes and ears for vulnerable children, not replacing official channels but supplementing them, being present in communities where they already rode, watching for kids who might need help. They trained volunteers on how to recognize signs of neglect or abuse, how to report properly, how to be helpful without overstepping. In its first 6 months, the program facilitated early intervention in 17 cases. 14 children were connected with services they needed. 3 families were reunified who might otherwise have been separated. Sophie's drawing hung in the program office, a reminder of why it existed. On Sophie's 8th birthday in April, Claire threw a party at their apartment. Frank came. Margaret came. Angie from the diner came. Some kids from Sophie's new school came. And Jax came along with Harper and Dalton and a few other riders. They brought presents. Practical things, mostly school supplies, new shoes, a winter coat for next year. But Harper brought something else, a leather jacket, small, child-sized with the Iron Wings patch sewn onto the back. Every member gets one, she explained, even honorary ones. Sophie put it on. It was too big room to grow into, but she wore it proudly. They ate cake. They sang. They celebrated not just Sophie's birthday, but the fact that they were all here together, alive and whole. As the party wound down, Sophie found herself on the apartment balcony with Jax. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Can I tell you what I want to be when I grow up? Sophie asked. Sure, I want to help kids, like Margaret does, like you do. Kids who are alone or scared or lost. That's a good goal because now I know what it feels like. And I know that sometimes just one person stopping, just one person believing you, it changes everything. You're going to do great things, Sophie. How do you know? Because you already have. A year later, Sophie was 9 and in third grade. She was a good student, quiet but attentive, the kind of kid teachers appreciated. She still drew, constantly. Her room was full of drawings and landscapes and people and imaginary scenes, but also documentary drawings, records of real things, the apartment, the diner where her mother worked, the motorcycle shop where Jax built bikes. She drew memory. She drew evidence that things had happened, that people existed, that moments mattered. One day in school, her teacher assigned an essay, "Write about a time you were brave." Sophie thought for a long time before she started writing, not because she didn't know what to write about, but because she was trying to find the right words. She wrote about Friday night, about waiting, about making the decision to look, about Monday on the streets and Monday night on the sidewalk. She wrote about Tuesday morning and the sound of engines and a man who stopped when nobody else did. She wrote about drawing her mother's face from memory and about 500 strangers who decided to help. She wrote about what it felt like to find what you thought was lost forever. At the end, she wrote, "Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what you have to do even when you're terrified. And sometimes when you're brave enough to ask for help or to keep going or to believe in something, other people see that bravery and they become brave too. That's how communities work. One person starts and then everyone else joins in." My mom says we're all connected like that, like threads in a blanket. Separate, we're just strings. Together, we're something that keeps people warm. Her teacher read the essay and cried. She asked Sophie's permission to share it at the next school assembly. Sophie said yes. 2 years after the ride, Sophie was 10. The Iron Wings Watch program had expanded to 7 counties. They had helped 47 children. The program had a website now funding from grants, official partnerships with state agencies. Sophie's drawing was featured on the homepage. A small note beneath it explained, "This program began because one 7-year-old girl refused to give up and 500 strangers decided to help her. We ride for her and for every child who needs someone to show up." Claire had been promoted to assistant manager at Riverside Diner. They had moved to a bigger apartment, still modest, but theirs with a lease they could afford. Sophie had her own room with a real desk and a bookshelf full of books and a window that looked out onto a park. They were okay, more than okay. They were building something. Every Sunday, Sophie and Claire had dinner with Frank. It had become tradition. He was family now, not by blood, but by choice. Once a month, they visited Eastside Motors. Jax always had time to show Sophie what he was working on, to teach her about engines and mechanics and the satisfaction of fixing things with your own hands. "You're good at this," he told her one Saturday as she handed him tools while he rebuilt a carburetor. "I like understanding how things work." That's engineering thinking. You could do that for a career if you wanted. Maybe, or social work, or both. Why not both? Sophie considered. Can you do both? You can do anything you set your mind to. I learned that from a 7-year-old girl who walked halfway across the city looking for her mother. Sophie smiled. On the 3rd anniversary of the ride, the Iron Wings held a commemoration. Not as big as the original, about 100 bikes this time, but meaningful. They rode the same route, Central Avenue to Knox General Hospital. Sophie rode with Jax this time, sitting behind him on the bike, her arms around his waist, her helmet secure. She was 10 now, bigger, stronger, braver in ways that came from living through hard things and coming out the other side. As they rode through downtown, people on the sidewalks waved. Some held signs. Some just watched and smiled. At the hospital, the riders gathered in the parking lot. A small ceremony had been planned. The hospital administrator spoke. She apologized again for not believing Claire 3 years ago. She explained the policy changes they had implemented, new protocols for unidentified patients, better systems for recording and following up on patient concerns. We learned, she said, that listening to people truly listening can be the difference between tragedy and reunion. Thank you for teaching us that. Margaret spoke next. She talked about the Iron Wings Watch program and its impact, about children helped and families supported. Then Jax invited Sophie to speak. She stood on the same platform she had stood on 3 years ago, though she didn't need anyone to lift her up this time. She was tall enough to reach the microphone herself. 3 years ago, she said, I was 7 years old and I thought I had lost everything. I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost my mom temporarily, but I still had hope. And hope led to action. And action led to people helping. And people helping led to my mom and me finding each other again. She looked out at the assembled crowd. I learned that week that we're not meant to face hard things alone. We're meant to show up for each other, to stop when we see someone who needs help, to believe people when they tell us something is wrong, to keep going even when it seems impossible. Her voice was steady now, confident in a way it hadn't been at 7. The Iron Wings Watch has helped 47 kids in 3 years. That's 47 times someone showed up. 47 times hope worked. 47 families that didn't fall apart because people cared enough to catch them. She paused. I want to say thank you to every person who rode 3 years ago, to everyone who's ridden since, to everyone who's volunteered or donated or just believed that this work matters. You changed my life, and you've changed 47 other lives too. That's what showing up does. It changes everything. The applause was long and heartfelt. After the ceremony, people milled around talking, sharing stories. Sophie found herself surrounded by well-wishers, people wanting to tell her how much her story had meant to them. A young woman approached. She looked to be in her 20s with short dark hair and nervous energy. Sophie, I don't know if you remember me. I was one of the riders 3 years ago. I rode from Nashville. Sophie looked at her. I'm sorry I don't remember everyone. There were so many people. That's okay. I just wanted to tell you something. I almost didn't come that day. I thought, what difference can one more bike make, 500 or 501, who cares? She paused. But I came anyway, and I heard you speak. I saw what you did, and it changed how I think about my own life, about what matters, about showing up even when it feels small. It's not small, Sophie said. You were one of the 518. You mattered. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for being brave enough to look for your mom, for teaching the rest of us what courage looks like. Thank you for showing up. As the sun set that evening, Sophie sat on the balcony of their apartment with Claire. The October air was cool, familiar, the same quality it had been 3 years ago. Do you think about it a lot? Claire asked. That week, sometimes not as much as I used to. Does it still scare you? Parts of it, the Monday night part mostly, being alone in the dark. Claire pulled Sophie closer. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm not. Claire looked at her, surprised. I mean, I don't want to do it again, Sophie clarified. It was terrible, but it taught me things. Important things about what I'm capable of, about people being good, about community and hope and not giving up. You're wise beyond your years, you know that. You tell me that a lot, because it's true. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights come on across the city. Mom, yeah, baby. We never break promises, right? That's still our rule. That's still our rule. Good, because I promise I'm never going to forget what happened. I'm never going to forget that when things got hard, people showed up. And I'm going to be one of the people who shows up too. I know you will. And I promise that I'm going to use what I learned to help other kids. Kids who are scared or alone or who think nobody cares. That's a good promise. And I'm going to keep drawing, because drawing is how I remember, how I make sense of things, how I show people what matters. Claire kissed the top of Sophie's head. "You're going to change the world, Sophie Calloway." "I already did once. I can do it again." Inside the apartment, Sophie's room held evidence of 3 years of growth. Drawings covered the walls. Some were the same subject drawn over and over as her skills improved. The motorcycle procession. The moment of reunion. Her mother's face. Jack's on his bike. On her desk sat the original drawing she had made at 7. Me and Mom under the yellow sun, carefully preserved in a frame. Beside it, a photograph. Sophie at 10 wearing her leather jacket with the iron wings patch, standing between Claire and Jack's outside Eastside Motors. All three of them smiling. On her bookshelf, arranged chronologically, were folders full of newspaper clippings. The original coverage of the ride. Follow-up stories about the Iron Wings Watch program. Features about community action. Articles about children helped. Sophie was documenting it all, building an archive. Evidence that this had happened, that it mattered, that one girl's refusal to give up had rippled out into something larger than herself. She had learned young that stories matter, that bearing witness matters, that remembering and recording and sharing matters. So she drew and she wrote and she kept every scrap of evidence that said, this happened, people cared, hope worked, love won. And every time she looked at her walls, at her drawings, at her documentation of those 7 days in October, when she was 7 years old, she remembered what she had learned. That you don't have to face hard things alone. That communities show up when you ask for help, and sometimes even when you don't. That 500 strangers can become family if you give them a reason to care. That drawings can be prayer and documentation and testimony all at once. That mothers keep promises even when unconscious in hospital beds. That men on motorcycles can be heroes. That social workers and foster parents and reporters and neighbors and strangers can weave together into a net that catches you when you fall. And most importantly, that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. It means being 7 years old and walking into the unknown to find what you've lost. It means refusing to accept that something precious is gone forever. It means drawing faces on 518 motorcycles because every single one of them showed up and every single one of them mattered. Sophie Calloway learned all of this before she turned 8, and she would spend the rest of her life teaching it to others, because that's what showing up means. You pass it forward. You become the person who stops. You draw the faces. You remember the names. You tell the story. You keep the promise. And you never ever give up on each other.